All right, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to our current Student Experience and Engagement Committee. We have a full agenda today, and we are going to jump right in. Today, on September 24th, we're going to be discussing the following topics. We are going to start with our student absenteeism survey, which we are have an outside vendor here, Ms. Kessler, to be able to go through the committee's work for learning reasons and gaining solutions to improve attendance in DC. We'll start with a 15-minute presentation and then a member Q&A. Then we'll be moving into an overview for the artificial turf topic and potential resolution, which our student representative Anna Mayer will lead. And then we will turn things over to talking about a nurse resolution and the next steps on that, which Representative Goulet, I'll have you jump in and lead at that point before talking about the Everyday Counts Task Force. Are there any other agenda items that we need to discuss today? I want to make sure that we keep us here less than an hour. But if there are other topics, I'm happy to try to make space for them.
I second your goals there, so I won't add anything else.
Thank you.
I would
Representative
just I would just like to bring up for a second about this cell phones and just a little bit about, or just to sort of get a feel for, especially if we have both of our student representatives, but
yeah.
just a concept for a blanket for it.
Sounds good. And I see Representative Barnes seconds that. And also just for context, the other committee that you are also a part of, we have put that on the agenda for a potential panel discussion in November. And so we'll talk about that at the upcoming working session.
Okay, good.
All right, student reps, any other additional topics to add to our agenda or nope?
Can I share with Fraser? During our student advisory committee meeting, unless I'm speaking for Anna and Kalik, I compiled the feedback from the student members, and so I could share that as well with you, Fraser.
Great.
I'll share that as part of the committee report that Anna, Kalik, Mingting, and Ryan could share out during the working session as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to our guest to update us on the context of our student absenteeism survey at this point. And then members, I'll ask if you want to just throughout her presentation, note your questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we can discuss them at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Ben. So hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Kiesler. I run a small research firm here in DC, Kiesler Research. I've had the pleasure of working with the state board a couple times now and worked with Darren a couple times. So it's very good to be back. Darren approached me about the absenteeism project that the state board is taking on right now. And so we currently have a contract for the development of a survey and a sampling plan. I'll talk more about what that is. But those are the current pieces that we're working on and that we're soliciting feedback on under the current contract. Obviously, there's an entire life cycle of the project that we can talk about also, but I just want to be clear about like what I've been contracted to do with the state board. So I believe that Darren has already shared out survey documents and the sampling plan. I'll review a little bit more about these documents and kind of what they are, but this is what we're soliciting feedback about. So there's two surveys. There's a parent survey and a student survey. I'll talk more about how they're different. And then there's what's called the sampling plan. The sampling plan gives just some of the methodological detail about the study, who's included, and how we're going to collect the data. So we have already received some good feedback on these from some members and some partners. We encourage you to review these documents and send your feedback if you haven't already. I believe Darren is putting the The goalpost of by tomorrow, Wednesday, COB of having feedback, any additional feedback from anyone who hasn't given it already. We certainly welcome and encourage you to send us feedback. The study will, of course, only be made stronger with additional insights from other experts who have their own lenses of experience and expertise. So thank you for those who have given some feedback. And again, we welcome it from others. So let me speak now a bit to the aim of the survey. And I see Darren is sharing links to these documents. So I'll speak to the aim of the survey. So there have been some good analyses in DC and elsewhere of available existing data on absenteeism. It's typically kind of drawing from existing school boards and school system data that has maybe some demographic data and some other pieces of information. Looking at the issue of absenteeism and what some of the drivers are, it's been largely descriptive, kind of saying like who was absent more often. And some of the results may or may not be surprising. A lot of you are already very familiar with the issue. This is kind of a unique opportunity in that we want to gather primary data that captures student and parent voices directly. So we want to know what the students and the parents are experiencing, how they perceive and value school attendance, and what barriers to attendance they're experiencing. So more of like the student and the parent voice is what we're shooting for here. The decision was made after some conversation not to focus district-wide, but rather to hone in on 46 schools in the district that have the greatest percentages of absenteeism. I believe the percentages of chronic absenteeism is over 50% for all 46 schools that are included in this plan. So we're going to basically focus in on the schools that are having the greatest issues with absenteeism and talk to those students and those parents. We're going to survey the students themselves in grade 6 and up. And then for the lower grades, we're going to study the parents we're going to survey the parents of the students. So for pre-K 3 all the way up to grade 5, we're going to survey the parents. Now, the surveys that we're giving to the parents and to the students are as identical as possible in the sense that the themes that we want to get at and some of the drivers and the barriers are the same, but of course we want to tailor the language and some of the content for those different audiences. We know at the end of the day that the reasons why pre-K 4 student is missing a lot of class is going to be different from why maybe a ninth grader might be missing a lot of class. But at the end of the day, we still want to know kind of the same themes in the sense that we want to know why they're missing class, what can be done about it, what's already been done. So I'm going to go through some of the themes that we're capturing. I'm not going to talk through the entire survey item by item, but I want to talk about what the broad themes are and some of the motivation for those themes. So first of all,
Hey, let me cut you off for one quick second.
Sure,
Would it be helpful to other members if Darren or I shared our screen to show the survey, or are people able to load the links? All right. Fraser, Eric, are you both good?
Yeah, whatever works best. I'm following along with it just fine. So, but
I pulled it up on the chat, but I think it would be better to show us what we're talking. I don't need to look at my face.
Okay.
I'd rather
Okay.
see the survey.
So I should open the student survey
Yeah.
and share my screen. Okay.
Thank you.
And just for those viewing, this is still in draft form. And this does not include pilot feedback or anything like that. So
yeah, Darren and I just met just very recently to review some more feedback. So it's very much in progress.
Bear with me. I'm going to on the screen. And can you give me a thumbs up if you can all see this clearly? Okay. And Aisha, what would be a good page to start on here?
Yeah, let's just start right there.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing that we're asking is about how much school they are missing. So This is self-report data. We're not doing anything with this particular survey at the moment where we're linking it to school data. We're just getting, so in other words, we're not getting attendance data, lateness, we're not getting any kind of demographics or grades or anything from OSSE or any school or the school systems themselves. We're entirely relying on self-report from the survey. So the survey is kind of self-contained in that way, that the data that we get from the survey is what we got. So we asked them about the number of days that they've missed. We also are asking about lateness because that's also been talked about as a parallel issue with absenteeism. And then we just go straight to talking about the reasons why they're missing school. This is something that we've iterated on quite a bit. It may be impossible to get an exhaustive list of all the potential reasons, but we want to have kind of like the main reasons why people are missing school. And that can be anything from, needing like mental health days, so to speak, or just not caring, not wanting to go, feeling that there's some kind of, there's a safety issue. It's not safe for them to go to school. Lack of engagement with the school, issues with the teacher, physical illness, whatever the case may be. So we have a list here that we're constantly iterating of the reasons. So I think we can scroll down some more. And then we do something similar for lateness. So why were you late? The reasons can be a little bit different. And then I think we can just go ahead and keep scrolling. I'm gonna talk very broad, and then we can, after I kind of give the broad themes, we can come back and get a bit more granular if we'd like, and kind of talk about specific items and specific wording and specific questions if you'd like. But I just want to give you a big picture first. We asked this question about what happens when you're tardy, knowing that schools have different policies about what happens when someone comes in late. And that might have an impact on when they're coming and whether they stay, and whether they want to come in tardy or just miss a whole day. Okay, then from here, we're going to switch gears and we're going to capture some more broad perceptions and beliefs. I pulled a lot of these from the literature, not directly, but kind of the themes from the literature, looking at what we already know about why students might be missing a lot of school. The factors that come up in existing research have to do with school engagement, a lot about the context of the home and family life. So that's why some of these questions are in here. But basically, we have a module, as we call it here, about school engagement, about whether they like being in school, whether they feel like they belong, it's a positive place to be, whether they feel safe in their school. And then we have a module, we can scroll down a little here, about family and social support. So again, these are factors that in the literature have been shown to predict absenteeism, whether they're adults in their life that care whether they go to school, the degree of stress that they're experiencing at home, social norms, so whether their friends also miss a lot of school, have all been shown to correlate to absenteeism. Then we drill down on the issue of safety. We know that's an issue in the district, other places as well, but safety in terms of getting to school, being in school, and getting home from school. We know that there's programs that are actively trying to address some of these safety issues, but we want to capture that. And then we want to know basically what the students and the parents think about missing school. Is it a big deal or not? So first, we asked them this question about what some of the major downsides are for missing school. Those can be social, like seeing your friends and basically doing the activities that you might like to do at school. It can be academic, having to make up the work, the grades worsening, and it can be kind of more about your family and social things like your family being disappointed with you, parents being mad at you. It can be missing school meals. So we're looking for what they perceive as the downsides, or they may not perceive there to be any downsides, and that's important information to know as well. Okay, so we'll scroll down a little bit more. Now we want to dive in and ask about, and I'll just kind of say that Dan and I kind of already talked about this. We're going to add a question that asks about how much we're going to kind of work on the wording, but how much absenteeism is acceptable to them? So in other words, is it okay to miss a day a week? Is it okay to miss a few days a month? Is that fine with them? Like, what do they think um, is kind of okay to miss? And I kind of get the sense that that threshold or that level of acceptability is probably changed over recent years, that people think that it's more okay to miss more school. Okay, then we have a series of questions here to talk about what's going on in terms of current interventions and or support for the student and the parents regarding absenteeism. So, oops, sorry, I didn't actually have it up myself. Can you scroll up just a smidge, Darren? I wanted to see what number 10, right? So number 10 is asking about correspondence between the school or the school system and the parents being told that about absences. Like, are they ever told? They only get told? Do they get told every time they miss a school day, or are they only told if they miss a lot of school, or maybe the students don't even know if it's possible? Then we ask about what kinds of programs and or support mechanisms they've experienced or they've been engaged with to support a school attendance. So we were able to kind of put together this list of existing programs that are offered through different agencies, different sources. This can include just, having a coach that talks to you. This can include um, having, teachers and guidance counselors talk to you. So we have this list. This is somewhere where I especially was hoping to get some feedback, because I know sometimes we might have a program that's named and branded a certain way by the program leaders, but maybe the students think of it as like, oh, this as something different. They call it something different, or they just think of it as, oh, it's when Mr. X comes by and sees me, or something like that. There might be other, like informal names for it, or just other ways that it's known. Like, so will the students actually know the name of, the attend program from the Attorney General's office, for instance? Or do they know it is something else? Did they know it is like, Mr. Brown comes and talks to us and he's the guy from the attend program, and maybe they don't even know that it's called attend. So if there's language here that you feel isn't like student friendly, we would certainly love to have feedback on that. So we asked them about what kinds of support, feedback, interventions they've gotten. And then for every intervention that they check that they've seen, we're going to ask them their opinion about that program. So for instance, if the attend program does some kind of intervention, we then would say, okay, how does the attend program help you get to school more often? So basically we want to know who's engaging with the students, but also what is the student and the parents' perception of the effectiveness of that program. Okay, we can scroll down a bit more. Okay, and then we kind of just get to the socio-demographic section. So we capture several socio-demographic variables. We're going to capture race, that's not in there yet, but we're going to add it. Gender, the primary language spoken at home, what ward they live in, age, which may or may not, be the typical age for somebody in a certain grade, but we do ask for the grade as well, and what school they're going to. So those are the main things. I guess I want to say, oh, sorry. And then at the end, if we can kind of scroll down to the bottom, we have two open-ended questions. One, and when I say open-ended, I mean that they can just type in some text. We ask them if there's anything else that they think it would be helpful for us to know about why they do or don't attend school. So they might be able to give us some insights there about, like, I'm beefing with somebody and I just like can't, it's not a safe place for me to be. Or they can kind of talk about, like, say, their mental health struggles around social anxiety and being in school and being in the school environment, or stress that they're experiencing because of school, anything like that. The second question has more to do with solutioning. We ask them if there's anything that they think could be done to help them attend school more often, whether that has to do with changes in your home life and transportation and how you get to school, factors about the school itself, whatever the case may be. So we're really looking for the students and the parents to be partners in the solutioning of the absenteeism problem. And this is just kind of I would say like the tiniest tip of the iceberg of including students and parents in the solutioning, but it is a start, and I think it would be a good jumping off point to then have further engagement down the road with students and parents that that are struggling with absenteeism. Okay, so having said that, let me just kind of back up a bit and say that this is intentionally a relatively brief survey. We're surveying students. They're not known to be super engaged in terms of like wanting to do a really long survey. I mean, we're basically kind of giving them more work to do from their perspective. So it's an intentionally brief survey. We really want to capture the big major points about how much are you attending, why are you or aren't you attending, what's going on to help you attend, what's been working for you, that kind of thing. It's not going to capture the full nuance and complexity of absenteeism, but we hope that it is going to kind of give us the broad edges of the problem, tell us a bit about the prevalence rates of some of these issues. So I'm sure everyone on this call has a lot of insight already into why students aren't attending school and why there is absenteeism. We want to try to add some data to those hypotheses and kind of understand like what the prevalence rates are at least in these 46 schools of the different reasons for absenteeism and the different barriers to getting to school. So again, we just kind of hope to capture the broad strokes of the problem and to attach some data to some of the kind of existing theories and kind of existing knowledge that people have from being just on the ground and working with students in schools. And hopefully understand some of the different segments. So we're probably going to have different segments of students, especially because we're looking at the entire, lifespan of students in public school life, from the littlest kids to the seniors. They're going to have different reasons, of course, for missing school that have to do with maybe family life versus the student themselves and all the interactions in between. But we'll also hopefully be able to look at different segments of the population and be able to look at like who's really the main profile of people who are missing for this reason versus the profile of people who are missing for these other reasons. Hopefully that will help us tailor and target interventions and support to get the best resources to the students that need them the most. Okay, so that was my over 15 minutes, but that was my overview. We've had a lot of great conversations with Ben, with Darren, with other people to get some good feedback so far. But I want to just open the floor now to any questions, suggestions, additional feedback from anyone here.
Fraser, let's start with you.
The first question in the survey, you've got that tardy question. Can you go back to the tardy question, Darren? I think it's around.
Yeah, it should be question 2.
Okay.
Or how many days were you late? Or do you want the reasons why they were tardy, which is question 4?
Yeah, question 4, I think. That's an awfully long list of things. But I was just wondering if can you go back up to the bottom of question 3, maybe? Or maybe go past that. No, go down again. I'm sorry, I'm doing this backwards, but go past this one. Oh, this is it. Number 5. Which of the following best describes what typically happens when you're tardy to school? And you have a list there. I as a tardy student, my reason isn't there, or what I would do is not there, and that is turn around and go home.
Mm.
Is that too negative?
No, I think that's exactly what we need to capture.
Okay, well,
If they're
I would say maybe you could add that to that list then. Okay,
Yeah.
and then I also have a question about safety. They go to the safety one. That's probably 8 or 9, I think. I didn't write down I'm sorry, I didn't write down the numbers. Yeah, there's safety. Um, Here are the choices. I feel safe at school. I feel safe getting to school. I feel safe getting home from school. And you've got strongly disagree, but I think it should be that you should have I don't feel uh, as a choice too.
So rather than saying, I strongly disagree with, I feel safe at school, you want them to be able to say, I strongly agree with, I don't feel safe, because that
Well,
might be a more
I
common.
or maybe you just have I feel safe at school. I don't feel safe at school. I feel safe getting to school. I don't feel just have that and don't even worry about strongly disagreeing or agreeing. Just pick out. But I guess that has to do with surveys. I don't know about that. Do you understand what I mean? Because like if I don't feel safe at school, um, but feeling safe at school and feeling safe getting to school and feeling safe getting home from school, um, just by putting strongly disagree, or maybe I don't know. I don't know how to get a true answer from someone who wants to make sure that they answer they don't feel safe at school.
So in theory, they should say strongly disagree. But I think what you're bringing up is that maybe it's not super intuitive to say that, especially if you're, say, like a sixth grader doing this. Um, you might kind of get caught up in like the double negatives or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So we can, yeah. So maybe we can think about the scale and just say, how safe do you feel at school? And the scale can be like very safe to not very safe or something like that.
Yeah.
Something more intuitive.
I mean, because having to read 5 different answers for the question is if you're talking, well, if you're talking to everyone who reads at a grade level, that's one thing. But I would imagine that um, you're not talking to everyone who reads at a grade level. And my first question is, how do we how do we get this survey to the students who don't come to school? And I've asked that of you before.
Yeah.
Because the audience, we really want to find out why students don't come to school, right? But they're not going to be in school to take the survey.
Right. So, yeah, and so that's kind of something that we're grappling with the dissemination plan. So, one piece of the dissemination of the survey is that it can be emailed out.
That
So, but
okay.
that depends on,
I'm gonna interrupt you for
yeah,
a second. Emailing out and making phone calls are not the way students, and for sure. All right, students who don't come to or who understand they know how to not answer the phone, or they know what trash cans are for when at school. From my 8,000 years of experience as a DCPS teacher, the way that we read is uh, the way is, but I'm emailing or giving a survey in school when they're not there.
right.
Fraser, you're breaking up a little bit there, and I see. Oh, Ben, I'm sorry. Representative Williams. I didn't know if you want to jump in there.
No, it's okay. I mean, Fraser, yeah, I think this is where the intersection of the sampling plan and the survey design are coming together. And I think on our end, right, like we need to leverage the relationships at schools and to try and reach students where they're at. I mean, I think that there's not going to be a one size fits all solution to your question. I mean, I share your intention around reaching the students who are most hard to reach. Um, but I also think they're like separate questions, right? With regards to what do we ask and then how do we reach students. And so I think like we can move into that next conversation too with like how do we reach students? That's what we have to grapple with as a committee. I think right now I'd like us to just check the box that we feel good about we're asking the right things. Um,
And
any additional questions?
I'm sorry, and Anna had her hand raised as well.
My comment was about reaching students, so we can pivot away from that.
I'll just be quick then too on this I liked your comment, Fraser, on the trying to rephrase that question, because maybe a way to phrase it would be, how safe do you feel at school? And then you could have the choices could be like very safe, somewhat unsafe, or very unsafe, or something like that. So that way they're not having to get tripped up on double negatives. And I do like the attention we put to the safety issue, because the survey that we saw where only 31% of students feel safe throughout their school day is really alarming. So I think it's an appropriate focus on that. Hopefully it will maybe help us drill down on why that is and in what specific part of the day we're really seeing a problem, because it's going to be hard to solve the truancy issue if students don't even feel safe going to and from school or through the day. So definitely like the focus of it. I think it's well done. Just a quick question on it. Why do we have the demographic data at the end? Usually that's up front. Is there a strategy on that? Usually I feel like those are the softball questions to get people interested, but I don't really care about the order. I just wasn't sure if there was a strategy behind that, because like you go right into it at the beginning, and usually those warm-up questions are at the start. So
Yeah, so another school of thought is to put them at the end, because it's kind of like you want the real critical information up front, so that someone who's going to do it for a few minutes and then leave, you at least got that information.
Oh, interesting.
And then
Okay,
like
great.
when they're kind of tired of it, then it's like, okay, now I can just finish up with these, like, as you say, the softball questions. So
Okay,
that's
great.
another school of thought that I typically
All right,
follow.
I like it. We'll see if it works. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I think it looks really good though. Good survey.
Okay.
Really good content.
I'm the devil's advocate. If you don't, if the survey isn't finished, okay, so and it doesn't have any demographic information because they didn't get to the end or they didn't do it, does the survey still count?
Well, that's a question for the analyst, but I mean, one could or could not. It just depends on, and it could count for some reports and some kind of when you're just kind of giving the descriptives, but obviously when you're trying to do some segmentation, it could not. So
yeah,
I mean, I'm of the mind that like you use all the data you get, even if it's not perfect and it's impartial, but that's up to the analyst, which is I think going to be Darren.
Yeah, two approaches would be like during the cleaning process, eliminate that. It depends how many responses we get back. We could also just look at, okay, the ones that didn't finish, just like internally, what are they saying? But when you're trying to get a representative sample, you can't just say this student speaks for the wider population of students if you don't have further information from that. So that's something we could circle back to during the analytical phase of this.
I guess my thing, is with regards to the what and not the how is, and something we've been talking about in conversations is, making sure that the data that we get is actionable, right? That we can really do something with it, that it's going to lead to the types of conversations with, you know, the council or OSSE or TCBS or whoever it may be that we want to say like, so are you confident, or what can you point to as like the main things that, like, however the data shapes out, right? We're going to be able to take specific things and being able to identify things that priority areas that we can work on moving forward.
Yeah, and that was kind of what we were trying to keep top of mind as we created this and as we've had like ongoing conversations. I mean, the way that I picture it shaking out, and again, like um, and again, I just want to be clear that like I'm kind of speaking to the survey development phase of it. So I can't speak to the analysis of it, but I'm kind of designing it with in mind that we would analyze it this way, is that you'd look at kind of like who your top absenteeism students are. You might take that absenteeism data, break it out into kind of chunks, like, okay, here are the people who are like the most absent to the least absent, and then kind of look at what the differences are between them. And so what are the problems that are leading to like the highest rates of absenteeism, and what can be done about that. I think understanding the interventions that they've had already, or the support pieces that have been in place, and knowing their opinion of them will be very helpful. It might be, I think it'll be helpful to know of the people that are highly absent, gosh, we're giving them this support, this support, this support, this support. They've got these 4 or 5 things going on that we're trying to do from these different sources. The one that they seem to like is X1. Hopefully there's one that they seem to like. And maybe we should put more resources into this, this avenue. So that's one, those are some things that I'm hoping will fall out of the data, as well as kind of understanding, well, this school really has a problem. It might be part of the cultural norms or the social norms of a school. This school really has a problem with the fact that like they just don't value being in school. And so the messaging really needs to be about like helping, kids and parents maybe understand the value of being there in person in school, and why it's not okay to miss 3 days a week or whatever the case may be. So we might see differences in the schools and just kind of the different cultural social norms that are in them. But I think I kind of went about this kind of looking at what the behavioral models are of absenteeism, and kind of understanding what some of the different inputs are, and knowing that there's the family context, and that there's the school engagement context, and these kind of personal pieces about their own beliefs and feelings. I think kind of combining those, we should be able to get kind of segments or profiles that of the population that kind of feel differently about school, and or have different kind of home contexts, home situations going on. And again, that might lead to more tailored interventions and support services. So again, like conversations around the importance of school might be important for some, but then getting safe transport to school and safe passage to school might be really important for others, and in particular for some at certain schools. So I'm hoping that by, again, attaching numbers to it and segmenting the population, we can be more targeted with our solutions. And I use we in a very broad sense, of course, of the district.
Thank you.
And just another point to that is circling back to Fraser's question about how do we get this in the hands of students. If this is useful to the school, the results of this, like at the school level, that might be an incentive for them to really get it in the hands of students as well. And our promise is to share the results out with the schools, the 46 schools that are part of this study. We could circle back on that at some point, but that is another like actionable item, is at the school level. Like, here's what your students are sharing if the sample size is large enough.
Yeah, but I do think, yeah, that the $1 million question, or one of the $1 million challenges, is like getting the data in the first place. And so we've talked about some different things like incentivization schemas. Maybe they could be entered into a lottery for, a reward or something like that. But that is going to be the ultimate challenge, I think. And that's something that we're going to have to think really creatively about, and as Ben says, like lean on a lot of contacts and networks to make successful.
Are there any, we've gone a little longer than expected, which is okay. And we'll go through our agenda a little faster moving forward. But like, are there any relevant questions that folks have while we have Aisha here around like the sampling plan, like how we're making sure that we're getting a representative sample, or making sure that we're capturing who we intend to capture.
I'd like to know what the plan is. Because if we're talking about um, the schools who have the highest absentee rate as our target audience, then we're going to have to sell this to. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to get the survey to students, not just to any old students, but to the students really who are answering things about tardiness and absence, rather than just students who are going to put down, I go to school every day and da 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 da.
Right. And I see your hands up.
As a student who gets asked to fill out a lot of these surveys and often doesn't want to do it, I have recommendations. I think that, as Representative Williams said, capitalizing off of pre-existing relationships with staff in schools is a big thing. Like, if my favorite teacher told me to do a survey, I probably would. Whereas if I just got an email about it, I probably wouldn't. And I think that that is generally the case. And I think using connections outside of just teachers and administration, like if we were able to reach like athletic departments or adults in the building who have relationships with students outside of just traditional academic ones, or parental relationships, because students also aren't necessarily going to fill out a survey because their parents told them to. I think that that would be more effective. And I agree that emails probably are not the best means of communication for students. I also had talked to Darren about this. I think that if representatives were willing to engage directly with students or visit students, that would probably be an incentive, because then the purpose becomes clear and it's not just some online thing that like you don't know where it's going and you don't know what the intention is. But if somebody comes to you and explains why it's important, then I think we would get more results.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. And I think that's, kind of gets at the challenges, right, of not like a one size fits all thing, but like finding the partnerships at particular schools that can also figure out when is best to reach students. Um, all right, are there any final questions that we have for Aisha before we move on to other topics of business today? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for this work. And look forward to incorporating some of the cluster agency feedback into some final next steps. And then we will, look forward to finalizing this in the near future.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for your feedback.
Thank you.
All right. We took a little longer than intended, but that is okay. I do think Representative Goulet, O'Leary, Mayor, like if you want to email, or just even put in the chat right now, things that you want Darren and I to keep in mind when we start thinking about a dissemination plan or about updating leadership as for how we push this out, we will definitely take that feedback into account. One thing that I wanted to ask leadership to do would be to go back to the chancellor. I think if like we can get school buy-in from either an email coming from Aussie, an email coming from the PCSB, an email coming from the chancellor, then that also will add legitimacy to it. And then schools can implement it, in homerooms or advisories or lunchtimes or whenever that they see fit. But I think, we want to continue to leverage like cooperative partnerships with our fellow education agencies. So that's something that's been on my mind. But I also want to make sure that we accomplish what we need to in the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to turn things over to our student rep to just update us on the artificial turf situation in DC. So Anna, feel free to take it away.
Thank you. So artificial turf is not a relatively new idea, but a relatively new concern because of issues coming to light about the health and safety of students and people in general exposed to artificial turf. And there have been several fields in DC lately where this has been especially contested issue. For example, Lafayette Field and Steed Field. There was a fair amount of pushback from the community when the city announced that those fields would transition to artificial turf. And there are several organizations like parent and community-led organizations like Chevy Chase Voice who are driving forces against artificial turf. And I have researched this from a relatively unbiased perspective. I now have a opinion based on my research, but it is pretty new. And I think that it is worth considering as a state board if this is something we want to engage with, considering how it affects students because of the artificial turf on school fields and playgrounds. So some of the risks of turf are PFAS, which are known to be cancer causing and causing hormone imbalances and like various other issues that I can send over research if you want. Those have been found consistently in artificial turf, and the city is supposed to be testing. There's a specific procedure for testing for PFAS and artificial turf that the city is supposed to be doing and are not doing, which is a concern. There's also concerns about the effects of heat and heat islands caused by artificial turf because it attracts the sun in a way that natural materials just don't. Fields can reach up to 160 degrees on really hot days, which is obviously incredibly dangerous for students and anybody to be on. The concerns with forever chemicals in artificial turf are pretty widespread. The DC Attorney General has filed lawsuits against companies known to produce products with PFAS, and there's also environmental concerns about those chemicals leaching into runoff and going into the rivers. So all of those concerns combined are, for me, cause for concern in terms of having these fields in our schools. There are certainly arguments for keeping artificial turf, including maintenance and issues like reseeding. Like I'm sure you all have seen the fields that are natural grass and just become like mud pits because it's hard to maintain them. But then there are counter arguments to that, that you also have to do extensive testing on artificial turf, and it's not necessarily cheaper or more sustainable to have artificial turf over natural fields. So over the summer, I rough draft of a resolution about potentially making some type of statement about the state board's position on artificial turf. It was drafted from a we should stop doing this perspective, but I am certainly open to any critiques of that. And I think that it's just an important issue to talk about considering the health and environmental concerns.
Representative Goulet.
Representative Mayor, I appreciate you raising this, and I think you do raise a lot of good points on it. I just kind of want to go through a little bit of history I've seen on this. Back when we had, this was dating back to when DGS was called the Office of Public Education Facilities Modernization, which Fraser remembers back when Alan Liu was running that, but it was quite a while ago. And we received numerous complaints from parents and community groups about the mud pit fields that we had in DC and the lack of use. I mean, if you have a field that's grass, which you'd have to put down artificial turf because natural grass won't work at all. I'm sorry, not art, but let me rephrase that. You have to put down not artificial turf, but you have to put down turf because just doing it naturally, I mean, that'll turn into mud in weeks. But even with putting down turf, the fields could only take about 2 or 3 hours of play. So because we're in a city with limited space, you had gym classes trying to go use the fields. You then had sports practices after school, and then the community trying to use it. And the fields were a disaster. Like that, they were barren, and the grass was just compacted down. So that didn't work. I mean, because we're in a city with limited fields, if we went back to natural grass, we'd either need to replace turf regularly. Like, I mean, I'm talking about putting in new real grass turf, not artificial turf. And that's cost prohibitive. I am concerned about the forever chemicals issues. I did read the Connecticut study. You probably read that in your research, though. that showed, even though there are chemicals in there, I mean, I've got a takeout container here, which probably has some of those chemicals in it too, that you worry about leaching into your body. But it didn't, the Connecticut survey didn't show a high level of ingestion of those chemicals. So uh, for me on this, you're trying to weigh a couple different things. And I just remember before the issue of the fields just being unusable. So I don't think we're in a position right now uh, to do anything but study it. I would be glad if there are chemicals in the fields that we do the studies, if the cities were required to do it and not doing it, I would be interested in the state board pursuing that. But the issue you raised for me that even concerns me more, and I want to learn more about it, is the issue of the playgrounds. Because if I'm less worried about athletes getting the rubber crumb in their mouths than I'm worried about kids. And when we redid the playgrounds through Play DC, there was a big accessibility push to move away from wood chips and add the rubber crumb base to the playgrounds. And if there's chemicals in that little children, like I'm talking toddlers, could get on their hands and then in their mouth, then I'm more worried about that, frankly, than the artificial turf on the fields where high school athletes are unlikely to get it in their mouth. So, I mean, based on the Connecticut study, I'm always open to learning more about this, but I just don't see this as a path right now, other than looking at it, which I'm always willing to do, that I think we can make a switch on. Is that helpful at all? I mean, that's just my perspective on it. I'd love to hear what other members think as well.
As someone who lived on fields all my career, uh, the all of the football fields in DCPS are artificial turf now, and they're used all the time, every day, all year, all week long. If you go to Roosevelt High School on Saturday afternoons in the fall, there are football games from 10 o'clock till 6 o'clock. Same thing at Cardozo on beautiful artificial fields. Now, I'm a purist when it comes to baseball, and I have everything to do with Maury Wills Field at Banneker, which we built up completely as a baseball stadium and really hasn't been torn up by the community at all. But it hasn't been maintained at all either. It's a Bermuda grass. It used to be a Bermuda grass field. So that not until July was it green. Then in the fall, it was beautiful. But there's a lot to be said for a set aside baseball field. I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me about grass at all. I cut enough. I used my lawnmower for too many years on that field. But as far as, I mean, I know that the Chevy Chase argument, I was there at the ANC. It seems to me that it's a territorial argument with Chevy Chase rather than a safety or anything else kind of argument. So there's not a real solution to this. Or as my teacher who taught me in 10th grade, there's not a panacea for these fields, especially as Eric was saying about space, because there isn't any space in the city to build new fields, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think for me right now, the issues that Representative Goulet identified, um, and the concerns around safety are the things that are most troubling to me about this, particularly around the chemicals. And I do think that for it to be perceived seriously and factored into broader plans in the future, we want to make sure there's robust research and data to support that. Um, and so like I don't want to take these concerns lightly by all, but at the same time, like when I look at the resolution right now, and I think you did a great job on it. I think that the thing that's going to help it move forward quicker is like more of the things that we can't find right now that we need to find more data points on to take stock of what we're using and what chemicals are there and the impact that it could potentially have. So I would second Representative Goulet's suggestion to like move forward with the resolution around suggesting further study and data collection. And I think that that can be useful moving forward once we have that information and could potentially solicit that information. And I think that ties in very nicely with our potential, um, you know, pitch around expanding state board authority to be able to ask OSSI for certain information around these fields, ask DGS for information around fields and facilities so that we can, you know, look at it comprehensively. Is that okay if we pause that for the moment right now on that issue and then seek to adapt and adjust the resolution for those purposes?
And if we can add to the resolution, I would really like a focus on the playgrounds, because if those are in our schools, I know for obviously accessibility issues, we shifted to that surface. And for me, that's a far greater concern than the athletic fields, because you have children using it a lot more, and you have children using it a lot more who are likely to get the crumb in their mouth, a lot more than you would on any sort of athletic field. So if we could have a focus on the school playgrounds, particularly, maybe with DC Health being looped in as well, to let us know if this is an issue where we maybe want to tear up that surface and put wood chips back down, or stone, uh, ground fine stone in there. I know that then, impedes though the accessibility issues with those playgrounds. So we'll have to try to weigh that. But I would love to have the focus be there before it be on the athletic fields.
Yeah, I think that's a more salient and potentially impactful issue as well. I want to move us forward just to give you a little space, Representative Goulet, to discuss potential next steps with the nurse resolution.
Well, I want to thank you for your leadership on that, Chairman, and the committee members for supporting the issue the last time we discussed it. I mean, the key on this is going to be funding. I think that's the reason why DC Health hasn't done anything on this. I think they were wedded to a model that's now proven to be ineffective, which there was debate for years with Dr. Nesbitt. I think Representative O'Leary was, I think you testified at one of the council meetings on this issue as well, to try to get full nurse coverage. And we pushed it for a while. The DC Health Director was Dr. Nesbitt. There's new leadership at DC Health, so hopefully it will get a fresh look now from the new leadership there. But I think the key is funding. I think the model has failed. I mean, there's no doubt the data that state board staff found from DC Health, where we're going from 84 or 82 to 44 nurses in a year, that's really alarming, because the registered nurses are fleeing the system because they're being treated as basically EMTs to report to emergencies versus a school nurse who can be connected to their community. So it's a failed model right now. We need to just realize we've got to pay a more competitive salary. So it's going to be about the budget. We need to get advocacy on this. I think we've already got a core of people coming together who are really excited about this, both students and parents. So I'm going to make a push to the parents in Ward 3, and then try to build across the city folks that will go in and advocate for this, because the devil is going to be in getting it in the budget. If you don't have it in there, it's not going to go very far. And I mean, the estimates last time ranged from about 15 million, which we can spread out over a period of years. But it's going to take more to attract and retain nurses, because we've got to pay them a fair wage. And then the $10,000 of student loan reimbursement will be on top of that, and that will have a cost too associated with it. I think both are needed to really retain nurses and be competitive. So I'm excited to advocate with all of you. I think the next step is really the bill will go to council. The next step will be to try to get a hearing in the fall on the legislation. If the council holds a hearing on it, it'll just have to be reintroduced next council period, so it can then be considered with the budget. So I think that's the path we would look at. And I just thank everybody for your support on this. And I think it's something that's going to be really critical to keeping our students healthy and safe.
Yeah, I agree. Are there any questions or comments on this topic?
We need to get it out there in the public, because a lot of at every meeting I go to, I bring it up, and almost all of the people in the meeting are like, "You mean there's not a nurse in every school?"
Yep.
Right.
And we need
This is one of the top 3 issues for parents. that here. And I think they really care about it. They just don't know how to advocate for it. So I'm going to start trying to attend the ANC meetings in my ward to talk about it with folks, and then maybe get a resolution from the Ward 3 Dems on it too, to try to get expanded just knowledge about it. And I think once we get people together in an advocacy coalition, this will get done pretty easily because I think there's a lot of support for it.
I agree. We need to get the mayor making a statement about it.
Yeah, I think she's received bad advice from her previous DC health director on this. I think
hell yeah.
They were guiding the mayor in a direction that I just don't think has proven to be effective with this, with these health technicians. It's not what the parents want. And we've now, because we've got so many health technicians, the registered nurses have to basically do the floating model to monitor staff that can't operate independently. So they're leaving because they don't like the job of being a floating nurse. So it's the worst of all worlds now. So
Yep.
hopefully, we'll get better, guidance from the new incoming director, or the new director. She's not incoming anymore, but the new director of DC Health.
Yeah, I think that could be informative. And thank you, Representative Goulet, for all your work on this. And, we'll continue to kind of think strategically outside of just the state board's purview for how we can see this into effect this upcoming budget cycle. I want to move us into the final thing for today. And then, well, I will reserve just a moment, Representative O'Leary, for the cell phone conversation, but that hopefully we can keep that more to updates. I'm happy to email some of these things out. Darren has done a great job attending the Everyday Counts Task Force meetings with me. But essentially, some key updates, just so you know, there were a couple people added to the task force for this new iteration. Philip Copeland, who used to work at the state board, is now the director of strategic youth and safety initiatives. He's on the task force, as well as Abdul Kareem Ewing. He's the director of strategic K-12 initiatives at the DME. Just so we know, the Everyday Counts Task Force is not being rebooted. It's a continuation of what has already kind of been happening. And the focus right now is identifying what city investments we want to prioritize, along with identifying gaps in services. So I was also recently appointed to the steering committee on this task force to try and leverage our agency leadership and to also apply a staff perspective of someone who's working in schools every day. I'm happy to keep people informed as that work develops. Right now, there's currently some pilot programs that are going on. Phase 1 is including Anacostia and KIPP Legacy. That is going until starting this month. Phase 2 is beginning in November. That's going to include Digital Pioneers Academy. And then phase 3 will start in January for the pilot program, and that will include HD Woodson. So those are the schools that have been prioritized for the initial pilot for this. We are also trying to think strategically about how we can target supports for both elementary school challenges, as well as middle and high school challenges, which aligns with how we're approaching the survey that we are also pushing out through our committee. So I'm going to stop us there, just trying to be mindful of time, but also substance. Are there any questions about the work of the Everyday Task Force, or anything that I can help elevate in future meetings? All right. And then Representative Larry, before we adjourn, I know you wanted to take just a moment to comment on the cell phone conversation that we've been having.
No, I think that I just want to keep it going because it seems to me that what we want to wind up with is the school or the LEAs coming together with a general kind of a policy that allows autonomy at the schools. Because right now we have some schools that have a cell phone policy, some schools that don't, some schools that allow cell phones, some schools that don't. And it's just a recipe for failure. And something's going to happen, because one of the arguments is, well, what happens if something happens in the school? My child doesn't have a phone. But that's not a problem. It was brought up at a meeting last night that someone's daughter was in a classroom and there was an emergency. Someone had passed out in the hallway, but the phone in the classroom didn't work to call the office. So they had to send somebody to the other end of the school to get somebody from the office. So this is a real structural problem that we're going to be facing. But we need to make it real and out there so that people understand there's a problem. Because we know that sometimes some people don't recognize that there's a problem.
Fraser, I want to thank you for bringing this issue up. And, I was kind of in the middle of it the last time where I hadn't really made up my mind yet, but I wanted to listen to everybody on it. But I've talked to a lot more teachers since you raised this at the last meeting, and I support a ban at this point. I don't know if I would support, doing it across the board with the charters, or whether we would leave it up to individual schools there to make a decision. But in DCPS, I think that the problem of teachers having to police this ban in the classes, I think, first of all, puts a burden on the teachers that we shouldn't do. I think the teachers should be able to focus on educating. And I think the phone should be taken at the beginning of the day and then get them back at the end of the day. And it just makes it so much simpler. I have heard arguments, and I've heard, where the teacher has to collect the phones at the beginning of class and then give them back. That's taking away time from instructional time, in my opinion. And it's, again, forcing the teacher to have to basically confiscate property for, it's not technically confiscation, but it's for a short period of time. And then, hoping the student isn't sitting there hiding the phone and then texting. We don't allow students to talk during class because it's a distraction. And I don't think they should be on their phones during class because it's distracting them from learning. I think there's safety issues that were raised also, but my focus certainly would be on making sure teachers can teach and not have to police phone usage in class. I think there are some benefits to having the phones, but they're far outweighed by the negative impact on education that they happen. So I would support you if you want, in terms of schools having a policy universally at DCPS to take the phones at the beginning of the day and then give them back at the end.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Representative Mayer, do you want to weigh in before we adjourn?
Sure. Sorry. Okay. As a student, I think I have a bit of a different perspective than you because I see phones and as most of my peers do, I think as I said during the working session, like a symbol of autonomy in a way that we know that we're safe. I know it's not good and it's not ideal, but phones are really comforting and reassuring to have. And I think that it is counterproductive for schools to invest a whole lot of time and energy into making sure students don't have those devices. I don't think that phones should be present in the classroom if the teacher doesn't want them, but I also think that should, to an extent, be left up to teacher discretion because some students, at least at the high school level, do use phones during instructional time for like QR codes or forms or websites or whatever. So I think that I don't think that a blanket rule over all schools would be productive. I do think it's important to talk about and to consider, but I generally am opposed to a big phone ban or even a big phone ban recommendation coming from us. I think that would alienate students and be frustrating for teachers and administration to have to manage and think about.
Got it. Well, I think we're all in agreement that like this conversation needs to continue. That's an important conversation to be had. We don't necessarily need to be in consensus at this point. but there was in the other committee, which we'll talk about in the October working session, a proposition to have a panel on this in November, and to really, investigate it more from multiple perspectives, but also look at the overall outcomes and benefits, both in terms of safety, but also in terms of learning, on students. I'm going to pause us there. Thank you all for your engagement and for your participation in today's meeting. Glad to be able to move this work forward with you. Appreciate that. And we will adjourn at this point. We'll follow up with email with any updates. And if you have any feedback on any things with regards to the implementation of the survey or other things, please email Darren and myself.
Great. Thank you.
Don't
forget to do your homework, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.